Dr. Alan Miller wiped his sweaty palms against his wrinkled suit pants for the fifth time in as many minutes. The enormous conference hall of the Galactic Engineering Summit was filled with the galaxy's brightest minds, none of them human, except for him. Next presenter, Earth Representative, Dr. Alan Miller, announced the automated system. Alan took a deep breath and walked to the center stage. The floating platform adjusted to his height as he placed his old-fashioned tablet on the display surface. The holographic projector flickered to life, displaying his ship design in 3 dimensions above the audience. Distinguished colleagues, Alan began, his voice steadier than he felt. I present to you the Threshold Drive, a new approach to faster-than-light travel. The design rotated slowly above the crowd. It looked nothing like the sleek, pointed vessels favored by most spacefaring races. Instead, it had a round central hub with 4 curved arms that seemed to fold back on themselves in impossible ways. A low murmur spread through the audience. Alan continued, explaining his theory about folding space around the vessel rather than moving the vessel through space. By creating a recursive dimensional pocket, he said, pointing to the curved arms, we can essentially step outside normal spacetime and... A sharp, clicking laugh interrupted him. A tall, blue-skinned Novari rose from his seat, his 6-fingered hand covering his mouth in a poor attempt to hide his amusement. Please forgive me, Dr. Miller, said the Novari, his translator giving his words a musical quality that made his mockery even more cutting. But your design violates at least 7 fundamental laws of physics. The energy requirements alone would. I've accounted for the energy problem, Alan cut in. If you'll let me finish. Another alien stood up, this one a bulky reptilian Krell. The structural integrity would fail instantly. No material could withstand the stress of what you're proposing. More voices joined in, each pointing out flaws, impossibilities, and basic errors in Alan's work. The laughter grew louder, spreading through the audience like a wave. The head of the Novari Science Academy, Professor Learn, raised his hand for silence. The room quieted immediately. Dr. Miller, he said, his voice gentle but condescending, we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm in joining the galactic community, but perhaps your people should focus on mastering the technologies we have already perfected before attempting to reinvent them. More laughter followed. Alan stood frozen on the platform, his presentation only half finished. The timer on his display showed he still had 10 minutes remaining, but it was clear no one wanted to hear more. Thank you for your time, he said stiffly, collecting his tablet and walking off the stage to scattered applause that felt more like pity than appreciation. Back in his small, assigned quarters, Alan threw his tablet onto the bed and paced back and forth. They didn't even let me finish, he muttered to himself. They didn't even look at the math. His communicator beeped. It was Jack Thompson, his assistant back on Earth. How'd it go, boss? Jack's voice was hopeful. Alan sighed. About as well as trying to teach quantum physics to a rock. They laughed me out of the room. Their loss, Jack replied loyally. What's the plan now? Alan stood silent for a moment, staring out the small window at the massive alien ships docked around the space station. Each one represented centuries of technological advancement that humanity was still catching up to. The Novari, the Krell, the Vox, all of them had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had barely reached their own moon 50 years ago. The plan, Alan said slowly, a stubborn determination hardening in his voice, is to build it anyway. Without approval, without funding. Jack sounded worried. I have my research grant money. And that old warehouse outside New Houston is still available. It's not much, but it's enough to prove them wrong. Jack finished for him. Exactly. Alan smiled for the first time since stepping off that humiliating stage. They think they know everything about physics because they've been studying it longer. But sometimes, Jack, it takes fresh eyes to see what everyone else has been missing. I'll start ordering parts, Jack said, excitement creeping into his voice. As Alan ended the call, he looked again at the alien ships outside his window. "Laugh all you want," he whispered. "You won't be laughing for long." The abandoned warehouse outside New Houston looked more like a junkyard than the birthplace of revolutionary technology. Piles of scrap metal, discarded engine parts, and tangled wiring formed hills across the concrete floor. The air smelled of oil, metal, and desperate hope. Alan stood in the center, hands on his hips, surveying his kingdom of cast-offs. "You really think we can build a spaceship here?" Jack asked, kicking a dented thruster casing. "Not a whole ship," Alan explained, walking to a large tarp-covered object. "Just the drive system. We'll modify one of the old orbital shuttles if we get that far." He pulled away the tarp to reveal a complex web of machinery surrounding a circular frame. "Phase 1 prototype," Alan announced proudly. "Built it in my garage before the conference." Jack whistled, impressed. "What does it do exactly?" "Right now, nothing," Alan admitted. "But with the right power source and these components," he gestured to several crates they'd hauled in earlier, "we might just break every rule in the book." 3 weeks later, progress was painfully slow. Alan sat slumped at his workstation, staring at equations scrolling across his screen while Jack welded components together across the room. "The power coupling keeps failing," Alan muttered. "We need something stronger." "We need a lot of things," Jack replied, pushing up his welding mask, "including food. I'm starving." As if on cue, the warehouse door opened. Delivery drones weren't uncommon, but this time it was a person, an official-looking one in a crisp government uniform. "Dr. Alan Miller." The man held up identification. "Department of Galactic Relations. I need a word." Alan approached cautiously. "What's this about?" The man handed over a tablet. "A formal request from the Galactic Science Council to cease your experimentation with non-standard propulsion systems." Alan's face darkened as he read. "This says my work poses significant danger to dimensional stability and violates safety protocols established for developing species." "Exactly," the man nodded. "The Council is concerned, especially the Novari delegation." "The Novari," Alan scoffed. "They're just worried I might actually succeed where they failed." "Dr. Miller, this isn't a suggestion. Earth needs to maintain good relations with advanced species. If you continue—" "What?" "They'll punish all of humanity because one scientist didn't follow their rules." The official's silence was answer enough. After he left, Jack looked worried. "Maybe we should stop, boss, if the whole council is against us." "They're not against us because we're dangerous," Alan said, tossing the tablet onto his desk. "They're against us because we're right." That night, while Jack slept on a cot in the corner, Alan worked feverishly. Funding was running out. Government pressure was mounting. But something in the equations kept nagging at him, a pattern just beyond his understanding. His computer chimed with an incoming message. Alan expected another warning, but instead found a simple text file from an anonymous sender. Calculations, specifications, and material compositions he'd never seen before. The message ended with, "Humans ask questions others are afraid to. Keep asking." Alan sat back, stunned. Someone out there, someone non-human, was helping them. By morning, Alan had rebuilt the power coupling using the mysterious specifications. Jack arrived to find him wired on caffeine, eyes bloodshot but bright with excitement. "Jack, look at this." Alan activated the coupling. Instead of failing like all previous attempts, it hummed with stable energy. "Who sent that message?" Jack asked, examining the new component. "No idea," Alan replied. "But whoever they are, they understand what we're trying to do." Over the next month, more anonymous messages arrived, each containing crucial information that helped overcome obstacles. Their progress accelerated despite dwindling resources. Then came the threats. First subtle, then explicit. Equipment malfunctioned mysteriously. Supplies vanished in transit. Their warehouse's power was cut off twice. "They're scared," Alan said, installing a backup generator. "We must be getting close." One morning, they arrived to find their warehouse door sealed with an official government notice. "Sealed deed by order of Earth Security Division." Jack's shoulders slumped. "That's it then." Alan stared at the notice, then smiled slowly. "Actually, it's perfect." "Perfect? We're locked out." "No," Alan said, pulling a key from his pocket. "We're locked in. Look at the seal. It's just on the main entrance. They didn't find the old service tunnel." He led Jack around back to a rusted door hidden behind debris. "They think we'll give up and go home. Instead, we work without interruption." "For how long?" Jack asked. Alan's eyes gleamed with determination. "Until the impossible becomes possible." The service tunnel had become their lifeline. For 2 weeks, Alan and Jack sneaked in and out through the forgotten passage, bringing supplies under cover of darkness. Their warehouse lab had transformed into a bunker. Windows blacked out, makeshift cots in the corner, and a small kitchen set up beside their workstations. Tonight marked their 17th straight day of work. Alan's eyes burned from staring at screens. His back ached from hunching over equipment. Jack wasn't faring much better, his hands covered in small burns and cuts from endless modifications to the drive components. "Pass me that calibrator," Alan mumbled, not looking up from the central module of their prototype. The circular device, roughly the size of a car tire, was suspended in a web of sensors and power cables. Jack handed over the tool. "We're running low on coolant again." "We'll manage," Alan replied, making a tiny adjustment to one of the module's internal arrays. "One more test sequence tonight, then we rest." Jack checked his watch. "It's already 3 a.m. "Science doesn't sleep," Alan said with a tired smile. He connected the final wire and stepped back. "Power up. 20% only." Jack initiated the sequence from their control station. The module hummed to life, emitting a soft blue glow as energy flowed through its circuits. Holographic displays showed energy levels climbing steadily. 20% reached, Jack reported. All readings normal. Alan frowned, watching the module closely. Same as yesterday. No spatial distortion. And the day before, Jack added, "Maybe the Novari were right. Maybe this is impossible." Alan shook his head stubbornly. "The math works. The theory is sound. We're missing something." He paced around the module, muttering equations to himself. Suddenly, he stopped, eyes widening. "Wait, what if?" He rushed to the control station, pushing Jack aside. "The quantum resonance field. We've been tuning it to match standard waveforms." "That's the protocol," Jack said, confused. "Exactly. We're following their rules." Alan's fingers flew across the controls. "But what if the field needs to be inverted? Not pushing space away, but pulling it inward." Jack looked alarmed. "That's completely counter to every propulsion theory in existence. Precisely why no one's tried it." Alan finished his adjustments and looked up with fevered excitement. "Ready?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Ready." Powering up again. 20%. The module hummed, its blue glow unchanged. Nothing seemed different. 25%. Alan continued, watching the readings. Still nothing unusual. 30%. Jack pointed to a sensor reading. Energy consumption is lower than previous tests. That's weird. 35%. A slight shimmer appeared around the module, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. 40%. The shimmer intensified. Small objects on the nearby workbench, screws, tools, a coffee mug, began to slide toward the module as if pulled by a gentle magnet. "Alan," Jack warned, "just a little more." 45%. The air around the module darkened, as if shadow itself was being pulled toward the device. The gentle pull became stronger. Papers flew off desks. A chair skidded across the floor. "Alan, shut it down." "Not yet. We're seeing something new." Alan's face was illuminated by the module's glow, his eyes wide with wonder. 50%. With a sound like air rushing into a vacuum, the space around the module visibly folded. Light bent around it. For a split second, they could see through the module to what looked like stars. Actual stars. Before everything snapped back to normal. The module powered down automatically. Every alarm in their system blared at once. Alan and Jack stood frozen, staring at the device. "Did you?" Jack's voice trembled. "Did you see that?" Alan nodded slowly, a grin spreading across his face. "We created a fold. An actual, temporary fold in space-time." He rushed to the data terminals, scrolling through the readings. "Look at this." For 1.3 seconds, the module generated a stable pocket dimension that connected to a point approximately 400,000 kilometers from here. That's... Jack calculated quickly. "That's lunar orbit distance." "Exactly. We didn't just create a theoretical fold. We made a doorway to actual space." Alan laughed, his exhaustion forgotten. "And the power consumption dropped during the event. It's like space wants to be folded this way." Jack slumped into a chair. "We did it. We actually did it." "No," Alan corrected, eyes gleaming. "We started it. Now we scale up." He grabbed Jack by the shoulders. "Don't you see? The Noveri, the council, everyone in that conference hall, they were all looking at space from the outside, trying to punch through it. But we just proved you can fold it from the inside." Jack looked at the module with new respect. "So what now?" Alan turned to the half-assembled ship framework in the corner of the warehouse. "Now we build our impossible ship, and then we show the galaxy what humans can do." The pre-dawn sky hung dark and heavy over the abandoned warehouse. 3 figures moved quietly around a spacecraft that should not exist. The impossible looked nothing like standard ships. No sleek aerodynamics, no massive engines. Instead, it resembled a round hub with 4 curved arms that seemed to bend inward at impossible angles. "Final checks complete," Jack reported, climbing down from the access hatch. "Fold drive is stable." Alan nodded, dark circles under his eyes betraying weeks of sleepless work. "Power systems." "Green across the board," said the third person, Dr. Ellie West. Her presence still surprised them both. 2 weeks earlier, she had appeared at their hidden entrance, security badges in hand. "Your energy signature is visible to anyone who knows what to look for," she had told them bluntly. "Fortunately, I intercepted the detection report before it reached authorities." As Earth's leading quantum physicist, Ellie had been among Alan's harshest critics. Now she was their accomplice, bringing crucial components and expertise. "Why help us?" Alan had asked her. "Because I saw your test data," she'd replied simply. "It shouldn't work, but it does. That makes everything I know about physics wrong. And I need to see why." Now they stood together beside their creation, ready to risk everything. "Launch window opens in 20 minutes," Ellie said, checking her tablet. "Earth security patrols will be on the opposite side of the orbital path. We'll have approximately 8 minutes to clear atmosphere before detection." Alan took a deep breath. "Last chance to back out. If we're caught, it's treason, unauthorized spacecraft launch, illegal technology development, violation of Galactic Council directives." Jack snorted. "So what's new?" Ellie smiled grimly. "Prison or history books. I'll take my chances with history." They climbed aboard through the small side hatch. The interior was cramped, scavenged shuttle seating surrounded by hastily installed control panels. The walls were a patchwork of different metals, wiring exposed in places. "Welcome aboard humanity's ugliest spaceship," Alan announced, settling into the pilot's seat. Jack, power sequence. Ellie, monitoring station. Jack's fingers danced across the controls. Conventional engines online for atmospheric exit. Fold drive in standby. Stealth systems active. Ellie added. "We're running dark." Alan gripped the manual controls, opening roof panels. Above them, The warehouse's specially modified roof split apart, revealing stars shining through thinning clouds. The ship hummed to life, hovering on conventional anti-gravity lifters. "Here goes nothing," Alan muttered, easing the throttle forward. The Impossible rose smoothly, clearing the warehouse walls. Below them, New Houston's lights spread out like a glittering carpet, oblivious to the revolution happening above. Acceleration in 3, 2, 1. Jack counted down. The conventional engines fired, pushing them upward with bone-jarring force. Warning lights immediately flashed across the panels. "Hull integrity at 89%, Ellie reported tensely. This frame wasn't built for these stresses. "No choice now," Alan grimaced, pushing the engines harder. "We need to clear atmosphere before trying the full drive." The ship rattled violently as they punched through clouds. Metal groaned around them. A small pipe burst, venting steam into the cabin. "Hull at 72%, Ellie shouted over the noise. "Almost there," Alan replied, eyes fixed on the altimeter. The blackness of space appeared above them, stars no longer twinkling but shining with steady light. "We have a problem," Jack announced suddenly. "Security vessel changing course. They've spotted us." A distant point of light changed direction, moving toward them. "Time to fold," Alan decided, reaching for the protected switch they'd installed for the experimental drive. "Coordinates set for Jupiter orbit." "That's 10 times further than we've tested," Ellie protested. "Go big or go home," Alan replied with a nervous grin. "And we definitely can't go home now." He flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stars seemed to bend around them. The view screen showed space itself folding, stretching, compressing. A strange silence fell over the cabin, as if sound itself was being warped. "Drive activation successful," Jack whispered, staring at readings that defied explanation. We're... The ship shuddered once, then went completely still. On the view screen, Earth disappeared. In its place, a massive swirling gas giant filled their view. "Jupiter," Ellie breathed. "We made it." Ellen checked the chronometer. "Transit time, 0.8 seconds. We just traveled 588 million kilometers instantly." The three humans stared at each other in stunned silence, then out at Jupiter's swirling storms. "They laughed at us," Alan said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "But who's laughing now?" News travels fast, even across the vast emptiness of space. By the time the Impossible docked at Mars Colony 3 days later, the entire solar system was buzzing with rumors. An impossible ship, instant travel, physics broken. Alan stepped through the airlock onto Martian soil to find a crowd waiting. Colonists, reporters, and most surprising, a delegation of blue-skinned Novari. "Dr. Miller," said the lead Novari, stepping forward. Alan recognized him immediately. Professor Learn, head of the Novari Science Academy, who had so publicly dismissed his theories. "We request a private conversation." Alan glanced at Jack and Ellie, who flanked him protectively. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my team." Learn's expression remained unreadable. "Very well. The Galactic Science Council has sent us to investigate claims of unauthorized technology development. Specifically, a propulsion system that allegedly violates established physical laws." "Allegedly," Jack laughed. "We just traveled from Jupiter to Mars in 6 seconds flat." "I'd say that's more than allegations." The crowd murmured excitedly. Camera drums hovered, capturing every word. Professor Learn's four-fingered hand twitched with irritation. "We request a demonstration." 2 hours later, the group assembled in Mars Colony's observation dome. The Impossible hovered outside, visible through the transparent ceiling. "We will monitor from here," Professor Learn explained, gesturing to equipment his assistants had set up. "Please perform a standard transit to demonstrate your phenomenon." Alan nodded to Jack, who transmitted commands to the ship's automated systems. "Watch carefully." Outside, the Impossible's 4 curved arms began to glow. Space around the ship darkened, then seemed to bend inward. In a blink, the ship vanished. 3 seconds later, a light flashed on the monitoring equipment. "The vessel has appeared in Earth orbit," one of the Novari assistants reported, voice tight with disbelief. "Now returning," Alan said calmly. Before the words had fully left his mouth, the impossible reappeared outside the dome, exactly where it had been before. The Novari delegation fell into shocked silence. "Impossible," Professor Learn finally whispered. "That's why we named it that," Ellie said with a small smile. Professor Learn turned to Alan, his large eyes narrowed. "How? Our greatest minds determined such travel was theoretically impossible. The energy requirements alone." "That's just it," Alan interrupted. "Your approach required pushing against space-time, forcing it apart. That does need impossible energy levels." He walked to a nearby table and picked up an ordinary sheet of paper. "Think of space as this paper. Your method tries to punch through it." He stabbed his finger at the sheet. "But our method." Alan folded the paper, bringing 2 distant points together. "We don't move through space. We fold it around us, creating a dimensional pocket where 2 distant points touch temporarily." "But the quantum resonance fields," one assistant began, "are inverted in our drive," Ellie explained. "We pull space inward rather than pushing outward." "The math has always been there," Alan continued. "But your scientific methods are too rigid. You build on existing knowledge step by step, never questioning fundamental assumptions." Professor Learn bristled. "Our methodical approach has given us 10,000 years of technological advancement. And it works brilliantly for improving existing technology," Alan acknowledged. "But humans think differently. We make intuitive leaps. We try things that feel right, even when the established theory says otherwise. Feelings have no place in science," Learn stated flatly. Jack laughed. "Tell that to Einstein, or Curie, or Hawking. Every major human breakthrough started with someone saying, 'What if?' and following a hunch." "Your civilization values order and hierarchy," Alan explained. "Each scientist builds carefully on what came before. Ours celebrates the rebel, the outsider who questions everything." Understanding slowly dawned on Professor Learn's face. "You succeeded because you were ignorant enough to try what experts knew was impossible." Ellen smiled. "I prefer to think we succeeded because we were brave enough to question what experts claimed to know." The Novari delegation whispered among themselves in their clicking language. Finally, Professor Learn straightened to his full height. "The Galactic Science Council will need to reconsider many things," he said formally, "including our assessment of human scientific capability." Alan extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Professor Learn took it. "Perhaps," the alien scientist said quietly, "there is something to be said for your chaotic approach after all." Outside the dome, the impossible hung in the thin Martian atmosphere, unassuming, ungainly, and utterly revolutionary. Not because it broke the rules of physics, but because its human creators had found a loophole the rules had never considered. The emergency session of the Galactic Science Council convened in their orbiting chamber above Earth. Representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations sat in tiered rows, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of the central platform. The mood was tense, voices hushed but urgent. Alan stood in the center with Jack and Ellie beside him, feeling small beneath the towering aliens and their cold stares. High Counselor Vex, an ancient Krell with scaled skin like weathered stone, called the session to order. His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "We face an unprecedented situation," he began. "Humans, barely a century into spaceflight, have developed technology that violates our understanding of physics. Technology that, in the wrong hands, could destabilize the galactic order we have maintained for millennia." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. "The full drive must be surrendered immediately," declared the Trill representative, her luminous eyes fixed on Alan. "For study and proper regulation. And if we refuse, Alan asked simply. The trilled smile didn't reach her eyes. Earth is still developing. You enjoy membership in this council through our generosity. That status can be reconsidered. Jack stepped forward angrily, but Alan held him back. This isn't about safety, Ellie spoke up. It's about control. You're afraid of what happens when an inferior species leapfrogs your technology. You don't understand the dangers, insisted a gray-skinned Morrigan delegate. Space-time manipulation without proper safeguards could create tears in the fabric of reality itself. Then help us develop those safeguards, Alan countered. Work with us as equals, not as masters taking toys from children. High Counselor Vex raised his hand for silence. The council will deliberate in private. Humans, you will await our decision. Guards escorted them to a small antechamber. As the door sealed behind them, Jack punched the wall in frustration. They're going to demand everything. Our research, the impossible, all of it. And use military force if we refuse, Ellie added grimly. Earth governments are already pressuring me to hand over my data. They'll sacrifice us to keep peace with the council. Alan paced the room, thinking furiously. We need leverage. The door slid open unexpectedly. A thin alien with iridescent skin slipped inside, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Tom. Alan recognized the Malosian scientist who had attended his original presentation. What are you doing here? Warning you, Tom whispered, his translator barely audible. The council's decision is already made. They're preparing a team to seize your ship while you're detained here. They can't. Jack protested. It's in secured orbit. Tom's skin pulsed with anxious colors. The Novari battlecruiser Dominance has already launched. They'll claim your ship is a danger to navigation. Alan's face hardened. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less. Tom handed Alan a small device. This will temporarily disable the chamber security. It's the best I can do. Why help us? Ellie asked. Tom's colors shifted to deep blue. Because progress comes from new ideas, not protecting old ones. Also, he added with a ripple of purple amusement, I placed certain investments in human technology companies after your first demonstration. After Tom left, they moved quickly. The device worked as promised, freezing cameras and unlocking doors. They raced through empty corridors toward the docking bay. Alert, announced the station's automated system. Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel respond. Run. Alan shouted as doors began closing ahead of them. They barely reached their shuttle before security forces appeared at the far end of the bay. Laser fire scorched the hull as they sealed the hatch. Manual override, Jack called, bypassing launch protocols. Hang on. The shuttle shot from the bay, engines screaming in protest. Through the viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness. The impossible is in high orbit, Ellie reported, fingers flying across the navigation system. But I'm detecting a large vessel on intercept course. The Dominance, Alan confirmed, spotting the massive Novari warship. Its sleek, predatory form dwarfed their small craft. We'll never reach the impossible before they do. They're locking weapons, Jack warned. Alan made a split-second decision. Broadcast all frequencies, full power. Let everyone hear this. He leaned toward the comm system. Attention Novari vessel and all listening stations. This is Dr. Alan Miller. The Council has violated its own laws of diplomatic immunity. We offered partnership. You chose theft and threats. The Dominance fired a warning shot that flashed past their port side. Jack, get us to the impossible. Now. Alan ordered. Evasive maneuvers. Jack pushed the shuttle beyond its limits, dodging energy pulses as they raced toward their ship. The impossible grew larger in their viewport, its unusual form a beacon of hope. Almost there, Ellie announced as another blast rocked their shuttle. Automated docking sequence engage. As they rushed aboard the impossible, alarms blared warnings of multiple targeting locks. Fold drive powering up, Jack reported. But the Dominance is jamming standard coordinates. We can't set a destination. Alan's eyes gleamed with desperate inspiration. Then we'll jump blind. That's suicide. Ellie protested. Not blind. Alan corrected, making rapid calculations. Uncharted. Remember our first accidental fold. Space wants to be folded certain ways. Let's see where it takes us. As the Dominance moved to firing position, Alan engaged the drive. Blindfold initiated, he announced as space bent impossibly around them. Let's show them what humans do best. Leap before we look. 6 months had passed since the impossible disappeared in a fold of space that left even the mighty Novari battlecruiser Dominance staring at empty vacuum. 6 months of rumors, speculation, and radical change across the galaxy. Alan stood at the observation window of Earth's new Fold Drive Development Center. The massive complex had been built in record time, sprawling across what was once the abandoned warehouse district where it all began. Below him, dozens of ships under construction gleamed in the morning sun, each bearing the distinctive curved arms of Fold technology. Thinking deep thoughts? Jack asked, joining him at the window. Alan smiled, remembering where we started. Scavenged parts and stolen power. Now look at us, heroes of humanity. Jack gestured to a wall displaying news headlines from around the world. Folly derive revolutionize space travel. Humans lead galaxy in any new technology. Council for CD to revolutionize Earth as major power. Not just heroes, Ellie corrected, entering with a tablet in hand. Teachers. Behind her followed a small group of blue-skinned Novari scientists, their posture respectful rather than condescending. Professor Learn led them, his once haughty demeanor replaced by genuine curiosity. Dr. Miller. Learn greeted Ellen with a slight bow. My team has been studying your equations on dimensional resonance patterns. Most illuminating. Glad to hear it, Alan replied. Have you tried the practical exercises? Learn's skin flushed slightly darker blue, the Novari equivalent of embarrassment. We find your methods challenging. The intuitive leaps you recommend don't come naturally to us. 10,000 years of rigid thinking is hard to unlearn, Jack said with a grin that took the sting from his words. Which is why we're here, Learn acknowledged. To learn not just your technology, but your way of thinking. A young assistant rushed in, excitement clear on her face. Dr. Miller. The Pathfinder is ready for its test flight. The group moved to the launch viewing area. Through reinforced windows, they watched as Earth's first purpose-built Fold ship prepared for departure. Unlike the cobbled-together impossible, the Pathfinder was sleek and elegant, its 4 curved arms integrated seamlessly into the design. Beautiful, isn't she? Alan said proudly. Indeed, agreed a new voice. They turned to see Tom the Melosian entering, his skin shifting through pleased patterns of gold and green. And only the beginning. The Pathfinder's engines glowed as countdown began. Alan's mind flashed back to their desperate escape 6 months ago, the blind fold that should have killed them, but instead took them somewhere no one had ever been. They had emerged in a previously unknown star system at the galaxy's edge, far beyond the reach of council ships. There, they found something unexpected. An ancient space station of unknown origin, abandoned for millennia, but still functional. Within its databases lay technologies even the oldest council races had never imagined. By the time they returned to Earth 3 weeks later, the galaxy's balance of power had already begun to shift. The attempted seizure of the impossible had been broadcast across all channels, turning public opinion against the Council. Smaller, less influential species saw hope in humanity's defiance of the established order. Pathfinder launch in 10 seconds, announced the controller's voice, pulling Alan back to the present. The sleek ship rose from its cradle, Fold drive arms glowing with familiar blue light. 3, 2, 1, Fold. Space bent impossibly, and the Pathfinder vanished. Moments later, A cheer erupted as confirmation came through. Successful arrival at Alpha Centauri Station. Transit time, 1.2 seconds. Alan turned to Professor Learn. You once said our ship violated 7 fundamental laws of physics. I was mistaken, Learn admitted. Your drive doesn't break laws. It reveals new ones we were too stubborn to see. As congratulations filled the room, Tom moved closer to Alan. The council has been reformed, he said quietly. Greater representation for younger species, sharing of technologies, all because humans refuse to follow rules they didn't write. Alan watched as a dozen more fold ships entered final construction phases below. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage. They laughed at us, dismissed us as primitive, but that gave us freedom to experiment where they saw only impossibility. And now, Ellie asked, joining them. Alan smiled as the Pathfinder reappeared above the launch area. Completing its historic round trip, now we go where no one, human or alien, has gone before. And we go together. In the distance, the original Impossible stood on display, ungainly, patched together, revolutionary. A reminder that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs don't come from the most advanced civilizations, but from those still naive enough to ask, what if?